seems like we're solving the same problems over and over. But imagine if you could solve a problem once. Automate your solution, then share it with your entire team so they can understand and easily do it again. You can end repetitive tasks, speed productivity, empower every member of your team, and scale your effort. Ansible is the engine that makes automation simple, and Ansible Tower is the framework that puts you in control. Ansible Tower is a powerful way to deploy your applications and your entire IT infrastructure with a streamlined interface, integrated notifications, and enhanced permissions to help you scale the power of Ansible automation. You can roll out updates continuously, provisioning is simple, and configuration is easy. With Tower, the most complex tasks become a button click. Centralize and control your Ansible infrastructure with role-based access control, job scheduling, and graphical inventory management. And Tower's REST API and CLI make it easy to embed Tower into existing tools and processes. Today, no team has time for manual effort in solving the same problems again and again. When you automate, you accelerate. And when you scale automation across your company, anything is possible. Solve it, automate it, share it.
All right, thank you so much. How are y'all doing today? Good. Excellent. First and foremost, my name is Justin Nemmers. I'm the product owner of Ansible here at Red Hat. I've got kind of an interesting story that I like to joke I'm more or less a recovering engineer that sometimes sounds like a sales guy. So I apologize for that, depending on how it goes. The other thing is I actually used to work at Red Hat before doing a couple of startups and ultimately landing back at Red Hat through the Ansible acquisition. So we're really happy that you're here. Just a couple of quick ground rules. For starters, we don't have a clicker that suddenly works. There's always something, right? Hello. Wow, all right.
Slide one it is.
What in the world? All right, so we're just going to pantomime today's presentation. Yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on here. There we go. Okay, cool. We're back. Perfect. Okay. So, for starters, Ansible and certainly Red Hat has a code of conduct. I would encourage you to look it out or check it out. We are a number of things, but for starters, we were always kind, we were always accountable, we are always transparent. So we encourage you as you're meeting one another and just talking amongst yourselves and kind of learning about what you're doing with automation, please keep the code of conduct in mind as it applies to all of the Ansible and Red Hat events that we're doing. So we're going to have a fun time today. I think we've got a lot of really great content. It's going to start fundamentally with a bit of an update on just the Ansible state of the business and state of automation. We're going to talk a bit about both Ansible Core as well as Ansible Tower. And then move on to a sponsored talk from Intel. We've got a really great thing that we're going to slip in there to talk about threat assessment, and I think it's a really interesting thing from our sponsor at Intel. Then we're going to dive into so much more kind of meaty piece of the discussion here. So we've got a number of the product leaders from Ansible and Red Hat, and we're excited to kind of dig into how to write modules and some of the cool things that you can ultimately do with that. Couple that with some Ansible essentials just to give you a good footing on how to get started with this. And then ultimately, one of the things I'm most excited about as product owner at Red Hat is this little idea called network automation. I mean, I'm fairly certain we all have networks, right? And last I looked, most of the network things that are happening within organizations have almost in every case fundamentally not changed in like 20 years. So we see an ample opportunity to really transform how folks are actually managing networks. And then we're going to finish the day off with a couple of security-focused events. Specifically, we're going to be talking about a security operations center from a partner company of ours and what they're actually doing around security operations automation. I think it's a really fascinating talk from the MindPoint group. And then we're going to wrap that up with one of our own, Sam Dorn, is going to talk to you about actually administering and automating security policy as part of your environment. So just quick, interesting show of hands. I mean, is everyone here actually using Ansible? That's always a good thing. It's like your fear up here. You ask a question like that, and it's like crickets, and no one raises their hand. So glad to see that's not the case. A couple of other things that are going on as part of the event today. We have an Ask the Expert table out there, so no need to sign up. Just show up, and we'll keep it staffed pretty much all day with a number of Ansible experts. So bring your tough, difficult, and probing questions, and we'd be more than happy to answer those for you and work with you on that. We've also got a couple of demonstrations, so if you are not familiar with Tower and would like to give it a shot or take a deeper look at it, we're going to give you the opportunity to do that as well. And then last but not least, of course, we have the cocktail reception, right? That's always exciting. 5 to 6 p.m. right out here, and just again, looking forward to meeting you all and chatting a bit more. Now, one of the interesting things about Ansible Automates events is that these really are meant to be, a bit lighter, kind of single track, a amuse-bouche, if you will, of Ansible content. We have a much larger event called Ansible Fest. We do those sometimes 2 to 3 a year in various geographies. The next one is in London on June 22nd. A little bit far of a trip, but if you wanted a good excuse to go to London, that'll be a great one. We'll have 4 to 5 different tracks, lots and lots of speakers, lots of great content, and the call for papers is open for that today. So we would love to see you there, and hopefully this is kind of a good appetizer for getting you prepared to experience kind of the full Ansible Fest type of event. And I died again. Come on. This is. There we go. Okay, and again, a huge thank you to our sponsor, Intel. Without their generous sponsorship, events like this would not be possible. So we're looking forward to having Steve Oren be able to give you just a quick run through of some of the big things that Intel is focused on, which I always find to be quite fascinating. So again, thank you to our sponsor. So now let's step back a little bit and talk a bit about what's going on in the overall Ansible community. So for starters, you're not alone. You're using Ansible, and that's fantastic. We continue to grow in both size and scope as a community. To date, there are over 200 global meetups, a number of which are happening right here in the DC area. And we have well over 47,000 members just in the actual meetup community. So what I think is really fascinating about this is that the growth and uptick of actual Ansible use really across the board has continued to accelerate, in many cases even outpacing our own expectations. And the other piece that's very interesting about this is the size and breadth of the actual Ansible community. So when you look at the core automation engine, plus all the various modules that people are contributing, the sheer volume of the actual community, the sheer size of the community makes it one of the largest projects in open source, period. But also one of the things that makes it so usable and able to really extend into automation of entire enterprise environments. End to end, whether it be the networks or the endpoints or servers or even containers. All of these things can easily be accounted for and automated thanks to this large community. And the other interesting thing about this is that as you kind of look at just general trends, we right now are by far and away the #1 searched IT automation platform on the planet. So I won't say who those other colors are, but you can probably read into it and kind of figure it out. But I think this goes along just to show you the types of things that we can accomplish when we're able to reach automation into a wide variety of environments. The fact that it's simple and easy to use. Anyone on the team can begin to use it. You don't have to write code in order to begin automating with Ansible. All of these things really, I think, drive the continued interest and continued focus on organizations that are adopting Ansible quicker than ever. Tough go, but of course we ran through this like a dozen times earlier. Smiley face, yeah, we're happy about that. And then out of the gates too, there still is a significant amount of interest on social media, of course, but it's kind of funny when you start to look at even our Twitter feed or other social media aspects where we're represented. You see kind of a wide variety of input, and it was once said, and this was something that we referenced pretty heavily in previous years, but if a vegan CrossFitter Ansible user walks into a bar, like what's the first thing they tell you about? So folks really love Ansible, and I think that the love that you all show us on our certainly our Twitter feed and other social media avenues is huge, right? It goes to the community and it goes to kind of the kindness and accountability that we like to have as a collective team and group. But we continue to really drive these types of discussions, and we are really focusing pretty heavily on continuing to kind of be out there in the community. So, since the acquisition by Red Hat, a couple of things have been happening. For starters, we as Ansible actually fall into what Red Hat calls the Red Hat Management Business Unit. And that's made up of a handful of products, several of which you've probably heard of. But what I think is really kind of fascinating about this is the amount of reach that Red Hat is, or really Ansible has gained within Red Hat is exceedingly significant, even beyond just what it is that we're doing on the management side. And we're going to only kind of grow that influence, not just with management products, but also exceedingly with a great variety of other technologies at Red Hat. So just interesting, show of hands, I know we have a lot of government folks in here, but other Red Hat technologies. Most people have other Red Hat technologies deployed? Awesome. Yeah, so we've got a number of things with each of these product lines that we're working on, but functionally, beyond what it is they all do, we're ingraining and embedding Ansible really across the board. So what we're trying to do here is really take your automation and then make that automation available in a wide variety of new avenues and areas to help you better operationalize what's happening in your IT environments. You have digital transformation initiatives, you have DevOps initiatives, but you still have all of this traditional IT and this legacy stuff, and like how do you manage that succinctly and kind of pull it forward? Ansible is really trying hard to help you solve those problems, both with additional core offerings as well as product offerings like Tower. The other interesting thing about this, of course, is by unifying kind of the Ansible approach across the entire management BU, you're going to be able to use Ansible as the kind of single unit of automation and definition across all of these different product lines. So what that means is that you immediately get a much wider view of everything that you can possibly do within your IT enterprise, and you don't have to go out and have everyone kind of relearn purpose-built tools. The other thing that allows you to do, I think quite interestingly, is approach IT operations management from the bottom up. And if you step back, and a lot of us have been in this industry for a long time, that's a really new approach, because traditionally what's happened is you have some process automation that you want to do. What do? You start on a whiteboard figuring out, well, what does our process even look like? Like, we know we might have something defined, but we need to kind of whiteboard it out. And then you take that and you kind of test it with the team, and they're like, oh, no, we actually haven't done it like that for a while. But the end result is you have to do a ton of iteration, and this is all a top-down driven activity, and ultimately you end up with something that you think you can begin to automate kind of in a vacuum. Well, the challenge with that, of course, is that it takes a really long time. Another challenge is that, fundamentally, IT is really about control. So I don't know about you, but when I was a sysadmin back in the day, the last thing I wanted was someone to show up at my desk and ask me what I did so they could automate it. Like, that's just kind of a weird thing. Like, you don't know what I do. Like, you don't walk in my shoes. So the thing is, Ansible really fundamentally allows us to break out of that model and allows individuals to control and understand and automate the types of things that they're working on, and then make those automations available to other teams in a way that still grants you the ability to control those things, but in a safe, reliable, and secure manner, grant others the ability to automate those as well. It allows you to share knowledge fundamentally in a way that no other tool ultimately can. So when you step back and actually start to look at a number of the other product offerings from Red Hat, you see that we are pervasive across the board. In some cases, we were already in use by these teams prior to the acquisition, and that's really only extended and only expanded in the time since the acquisition. So, if you look at the middleware components, certainly container deployment management and orchestration with OpenShift. I already talked about the Red Hat Management Suite, Red Hat Mobile Storage, the Container Development Kit. All of these things have Ansible fundamentally ingrained in them. So you're not having to learn a separate tool to start to begin to use and get real value from a number of these tools. And then, of course, we have the Red Hat training and Red Hat consulting teams. We have a number of consultants here, both current and former, from various Red Hat teams. But what I think is really cool is that the amount of uptake on the Red Hat training course has been nothing short of phenomenal. It's blown the socks off even the actual teams at Red Hat that manage the training curriculum. Without revealing exact numbers, it was the number 3 course last year, and it wasn't even out for the entire fiscal year. So, for a Linux company, I think that's pretty stellar that this lowly little Durham startup called Ansible has the number 3 course in the world for Red Hat training. And then, the other big question is, well, now that you've been acquired, what does that mean for all of your cross-platform capabilities? And I'm eager and happy to tell you that it means nothing. We're going to continue to invest in heavily our ability to automate across multiple non-Red Hat platforms. So whether you're talking about automating, perhaps Microsoft Windows environments, or even various clouds, be it AWS, VMware virtualization, Docker container environments, Azure Cloud, Google Cloud Platform, and that's just really the tip of the iceberg. We are going to continue to heavily invest in our ability to automate and manage things far outside of the Red Hat portfolio. Because as much as we would like to say that, well, your entire environment top to bottom is Red Hat, the reality is you have other things. You have you have hardware vendors that you need to work with. You have other clouds, other technologies, other things that you've either inherited or are pushing out for whatever reason. And so the point is that we are fundamentally still absolutely double down on ensuring that Ansible continues to automate across the entire stack of technologies that are present in enterprise environments, such that we can continue to be the de facto standard for IT automation across these enterprises. And then, of course, we have the introduction of network automation. So this, I think, is, again, significant, for starters, just by the sheer velocity of what we've been able to accomplish in the time that we've done it. So, a year ago or so, it was a technology preview. We had a very small number of actual platforms that we supported. And as time has gone on, the vendors themselves are stepping up. F5s, the Ciscos, the Junipers of the world are actually signing on and saying, we are buying into what it is that you're talking about. Just recently, the CIO of a major coffee chain that may or may not be based in Seattle had actually set up and told all of her networking vendors, said, hey, here's the deal. Like, we use all of you. From now on, all of you, anytime you're delivering a capability to us, it must be automated with Ansible. And furthermore, anytime you're doing any type of services work, the deliverable must be in Ansible. So ultimately, she understood that when you have a single platform that everyone can rally around and that can do pretty much anything that you need to in an IT environment in a perfect way, allow you to fully describe these entire, in this case, network environments, but everything that resides in that space is perfectly describable with Ansible. And so the network automation platform, I think, is significant because, given the typical adoption wave of Ansible, where you might have a sysadmin kind of start to kick it around and play with it a little bit, or perhaps that person was a developer, start to play with Ansible a little bit and say, oh, well, look at these kind of cool things that I can do here. And then so that grows virally a little bit, and other people are looking at it, and so it starts to grow, and that's often how we end up in accounts. That's how people really start to standardize on Ansible for automation within their enterprises. We're seeing the same thing happen on the networking side. So I would challenge you all to, whether you're the network administrator or not, if you have the networking teams that you work with, encourage them to take a look at Ansible. We're confident that that this is really the next big thing, to the point where we did with a large company in the Northeast, gave us 90 days to complete a network automation proof of concept, and we were done in 2. So these are things that really transcend the type of capabilities that organizations are used to from an enterprise software capacity. And so again, fundamentally, what that really means for us is that it is kind of automation for everyone. I think that one of the hallmarks of IT, and this is something that I've always wholeheartedly believed, is simplicity is unbelievably critical to these aspects. And you can't truly have an automated enterprise if everyone is not participating in that. So the greater the participation in the automation, the more successful or the more likely your project is to be ultimately successful. The other thing it allows you to do is build upon what you've learned. And that's, again, one of the common problems of, well, we've automated this particular task. I wrote a great bash script. Oh, I wrote some amazing Perl. Date myself a little bit to automate this one thing. But you know what? Like, it's still code. For those sysadmins in the group, like, we're not coders, right? And for developers often don't care about the system stuff. They just want resources to be able to use. So in a scenario where everyone can actually speak the same language, then and only then do you have the ability to not just build upon what you learn, but uniquely share that amongst other teams such that they're able to use and continue to build upon what you've learned. And so we've got a couple of interesting clips that we're going to show. I think one of them might be from someone who's actually here today, which is always fun. Another one from a guy at Splunk, and he tells, I think, a great story about how ultimately the automation for everyone really gives them that tribal knowledge and allows them to build on each other's success. And what you ultimately get out of that is that idea of building a culture of success. And we're going to talk about that more in just a little bit. So if we take a step back and actually start to kind of think about automation and really what it means, I think one of the big things that you see frequently now, and you see it in the news all the time about like Teslas and autopilot and whatnot, but even beyond that, there are kind of several levels leading up to that, where we have a coworker that has a car that has, I guess, the adaptive cruise control, and he likes to laugh that he can set the cruise control at his front door and basically never steps on the brake or gas again. All he has to do is steer the car to work every day. So there are kind of varying levels of this, but the big question ultimately is why? Like, why do we need to automate? Well, for starters, people make mistakes. Like, you only have to live in DC and deal with the traffic for one morning to understand that people make mistakes. And then the second thing is that people don't always necessarily have the best information. So we have some tools and some like silos of knowledge to help with that. Like Waze is a good example of saying, oh, well, the Beltway's a disaster. Well, of course it always is, but work with me here. So how can I route myself around, or what time do I need to leave in order to get there accurately? So you have kind of silos of information, but even then it's still imperfect. And then the next problem is that when we're driving, certainly, the reason I think this area is ripe for automation is because it means we have to deal with other people. And for lack of better words, and people can be kind of annoying sometimes. I know I can. But the point is that automation is one of those things that can help solve some of these problems in ways that are fundamentally transformational in how we approach these environments. So the big question is, why do we want to automate? So why you would automate something like a car, for instance, is interesting. But fundamentally, in enterprise IT, why do we actually need and want to automate and string these things together and do things in an automatic fashion? For starters, getting your life back. Look, again, I was a sysadmin, and the thing that I hated the most ever, hard stop, was getting paged in the middle of the night, was being on call, was never knowing how to actually fix something if it went down, was having to rely on heroics in order to get the application deployed. It was having teams of 5 or 6 people in a room on Saturday morning at 2 in the morning trying to figure out how to deploy an application that took 6 hours to do. Those are like real life impactful things, and it sucks. Like it absolutely sucks to get woken up in the middle of the night by a pager because there's a production outage. And so, we want to get our lives back. So that's one of the reasons why we automate here at Ansible. It also allows you to do more important things. Like, certainly our skill set is much more important than clicking a button to deploy a VM, right? Like, what that VM is going to look like. Why are we still touching these things in a unique fashion each and every time? Furthermore, like, I would much rather figure out why a particular port on an HBA is dropping 5% of its traffic when it hits 80% utilization. Like, that's an interesting problem. Not an interesting problem is deploying 6 VMs for a developer somewhere. And then fundamentally, we just want to get where we're going faster. So given all the complexities that we have to deal with on a daily basis, the more that you can automate, the more you can focus on the important things, and the faster you're actually able to get some of these things done. So, when you step back and actually look at IT and really DevOps as a whole, this is why we're actually doing it. So we're doing it because, again, we want to get our lives back. We can focus on the smart people focusing on hard work, not smart people focusing on the mundane. One of the things I'd like to say all the more frequently now is that nothing routine should ever be manual. And all you have to do is look at the news, and you see airlines saying, oh, there's an automation issue. Amazon last week had a huge outage because of an automation issue. So nothing that is done manually nothing that is routine should ever be done manually in our minds. And in all of that, it allows us, I think, fundamentally to serve the lines of business that we're tasked with working with and working for. So whether you're in government IT, whether you're an integrator, a partner of some variety, commercial America, ultimately there's some customer that you're working to service. And so finding ways to fundamentally help that organization, help that business do better by the citizen, do better by the warfighter, do better by the customer. These are all fundamentally important things that we as IT leaders really need to cement in the back of our heads, that we have the potential, I think, when well automated, to fundamentally change the relationship between IT and the businesses that we seek to serve. And so again, what this all ends up kind of coming down to is that fundamentally, automation is for the people. And what I think is really kind of cool about this is when you start to look at some of the organizations, again, that really understand this and really get this, you can see the kind of the light come on. Again, you'll see it from a couple of clips in the that we're going to play in and out of the breaks and whatnot. But when organizations are fundamentally aligned with this approach, what they start to see is really a culture of success. So when IT teams gel around this common automation platform and common automation language, and they're able to do so much more in an automated fashion than they ever were able to do in a manual fashion, you start to see, you know, the age of those year-long IT projects kind of start to vanish. You start to see people able to make rapid, iterative changes to an environment that provide real benefit almost immediately to the end user or the end customer. You start to see teams that were once totally siloed begin to be able to communicate much more succinctly. And all of these things can fundamentally transform and change how your IT organization actually operates. And then one other thing that we fundamentally believe in, and I think if you kind of step back and look at just automation as a whole, or really IT as a whole, in order to be truly effective, it has to be simple. And I think, you know, having spent a lot of time in this space, it's the complex systems that always cause you problems, right? And so finding ways to actually pull some of the complexity out of these environments and out of these systems really is the only way that it's going to ultimately be successful. And so I think what's also interesting about this is as you begin to look at how automation affects not just IT organizations, but really society as a whole, it's got to be simple. You know, the fact that you have let's say a Tesla that can effectively autopilot itself between points. If you had to read a 300-page manual and look at like the cockpit of a Boeing 747 with like 1,000 switches and dials, and if you had to understand how to do all of that in order to autopilot a car, it's probably not going to be all that successful in the main market. And so what's interesting is that in order to be truly effective here, automation needs to be incredibly simple. And it's that simplicity that allows individuals to rapidly pick it up and begin to automate the types of things that they're doing. And then ultimately share those types of automations with a larger team, which ultimately you're able to impact the enterprise from a whole. So it's the simplicity really of automation that I think is fundamentally one of the strong suits of Ansible. Certainly, you know, the powerful nature and the agentless stuff is all incredibly important. But you know, simplicity I think is one of the most important and hardest to describe things. You know, fundamentally we see a lot of RFPs, right? And it'll show up and have 30 pages of describe all of your features and tell us what you can do with this and that and that. And it's fine. But you know, one of the key things that become very difficult to actually conceptualize in an RFP process is simplicity. Like, what's the factor of, like, how likely would you say, vendor, are we going to be able to actually do what it is you say you can do? And that's a pretty big gap. And that's, again, where I think simplicity comes in, although it's hard. It's hard to figure out how to put that into an RFP. But that would be ultimately my challenge to you guys, is as you're working with your procurement shops and you're trying to figure out how to compete these things out, think about how simplicity plays into the type of business that you want to do and the types of things that you need to do within an organization. So, you know, to that avail, what you end up with, of course, is automation for everyone. And fundamentally, that's kind of like our battle cry for Ansible Core, that anyone within the team should be able to use it. And in fact, we've seen wild success. You were all here partly because of this. But don't be afraid to introduce Ansible to other team members. Don't be afraid to be an advocate for the type of automation that's really going to change how your IT organization behaves and operates. And then don't be afraid to challenge the norm with the types of technologies that your organization is already using. Because truly, in order to be transformed, in order to be DevOps ready or cloud ready, whatever the next big thing is, the more automation you have in your environment and organization, the more successful you're ultimately going to be. Okay, so that's the preamble. Now I would love to hand it over to Jag, who's going to talk actually about some of the product updates. Thank you.
So my name is Joshua Ginsberg. Everyone around here calls me Jag. I'm the chief architect, mostly working on Ansible Tower. So I have the distinct pleasure of letting you know where we are with our product family and product roadmap. So the guiding mantra of everything Ansible is it needs to be simple, it needs to be powerful, and it needs to be agentless. And in order to continue to deliver those values, we're working on each one of them with distinct areas. In order to make things simple, we're working on the user experience. In order to make things more powerful, we're working on making sure that they can run at scale. And in order to continue the agentless idea, we're making sure that Ansible can talk to more and more things. Along the experience lines, over the last year, we've had some tremendous gains. The Tower 3 series features a completely redone user experience. We brought in an entire UX team to redo the way that users interact with Tower, and it's yielded amazing benefits. We're expanding the ways that you can put together your Ansible content and Ansible pipelines to build more and more complex automation. Tower 3.1 features multi-playbook workflows. As you're putting more and more records into your Tower instances, being able to find them and filter the content that you've put in there is more and more important. So we're expanding the abilities to view, to search, and to organize the information that you're putting into Ansible Tower. And as containers of this brand new frontier, we're making sure that Ansible Tower keeps up with this containerized ecosystem. Scale is one of the biggest things that we hear a lot with Ansible Tower. A year ago, we had folks that were running Ansible Tower with thousands of nodes. Now we're pushing the tens of thousands, even soon the hundreds of thousands of nodes in Ansible Tower. So Ansible Tower really does need to keep up. With Ansible 2.0, we introduced the idea of custom execution strategies. So the traditional execution strategies from the Ansible 1 series are maintained, but the ability to run your tasks in different groupings, in different orders, with different synchronicities is important for being able to make Ansible run up to hundreds of thousands of nodes. But additionally, in Tower, we're fundamentally changing the architecture to make sure that Tower itself can cluster and scale out. In the future, we'll be doing this through the ability to run separate worker nodes, similar to the way that Jenkins runs separate worker nodes. But in Tower 3.1, we've introduced the idea to have a Tower cluster. So 3+ nodes of Tower all coordinating with one another, all sharing the job execution load. And with Tower 3.1, we've also been able to introduce a true HA solution. So you can throw your Tower cluster behind a load balancer, and as Tower nodes, if a Tower node fails, the user won't have any idea that that's happened. Additionally, with the connections, we're making sure that we can continue to talk to everything. In the last year, we've heard so much about the developments in Windows. As Windows has more embraced the Linux ecosystem, we've had to embrace Windows more strongly. So we've built out our Windows module support. The networking, as Justin was talking about, has been enormous. It's been the single largest growing center of modules in the Ansible core package. But then additionally, containers and containerized modules. We want to make sure that Ansible can continue to be the easiest way to get into the containerized ecosystem. Besides the things that we really need to talk to, we also need to work with other products extremely well. So we've been working with integrating with other DevOps tools, with integrations with Splunk and ServiceNow, and we're working with Atlassian to make sure that Ansible and Ansible Tower are an integral part of your entire tool chain. And additionally, as good citizens of Red Hat, we're making sure that Ansible Tower has integrations to pull, for example, inventory from your CloudForms instance. We want to make sure that all of this, all of the Red Hat management products feel more cohesive and more tied together. So last summer, and it feels weird to me that it's only been a few months, but we released Tower 3. Tower 3 had this new redone user interface. We built in integrated notifications, so while you've always been able to, in an Ansible playbook, talk to your ChatOps services, you have the ability in Tower to, as an administrator, to make sure that the playbooks themselves integrate with your ChatOps, so you can get a Slack notification when a particular job is run, for example. As the Ansible way, as the Python way, as the explicit is better than implicit, we did a complete top-to-bottom redo of our role-based access control, so that permissions are very explicitly granted and it's very clear who has permission to do what with what resources. With the introduction of networking into Ansible Core, Ansible Tower supports network credentials, and we're building out the support for network-specific automation into Ansible Tower. And again, we're more deeply integrating with the Red Hat product family to make it more of a seamless experience. Very pleased that last week we released Ansible Tower 3.1. This was a huge milestone. The engineering team did a fantastic job knocking out a tremendous amount of engineering in a relatively short amount of time. As I said, we introduced multi-playbook workflows, so you can take your Ansible job templates and build entire pipelines based on success or failure of previous jobs in this more complex orchestration of orchestrations. We've built out that scale-out clustering, so you have tower nodes coordinating with one another, sharing the load of API requests as well as job execution. We've made finding your records inside Tower that much easier with a universal search and with improved job detail view, being able to drill down the details of job execution. And for the first time, Ansible Tower is now internationalized. We introduced translations into both French and Japanese. We always get the question about when is Tower going to be open sourced. When Red Hat acquired Ansible, Red Hat made the commitment that Tower, like all Red Hat products, would be open sourced. If you would like to stay up to date on the developments of what's going on with the open sourcing of Tower, go to that URL and you'll be able to stay in the loop about when and how the open sourcing of Tower does proceed. And finally, we have a sort of a new project that's been gathering steam in the wings, Ansible Container. Ansible Container is a way to leverage your existing Ansible content in order to build container images and to deploy them directly into Red Hat OpenShift or other container engines. It was a lovely pleasure that last week Black Duck announced that Ansible Container was the open source rookie of the year for container technologies. Given that past winners of that award have been Docker, Kubernetes, and other dominant container technologies, we're very excited about what the future holds for Ansible and delivering into the containerized ecosystem. But now I'd like to hand it over to James Cammarata, aka Jimmy C. He's the guy who denies all of your pull requests. And he's going to tell you about what's going on with Ansible.
Good morning. Be pretty brief here. So just a couple highlights of the last year or so. As Justin mentioned earlier, the Ansible community has just continued to grow at least at a linear rate, if not a little bit exponentially in some areas. And it's one of the areas as the maintainer of the project that I'm most proud of, because I think we have a really great community. You know, you hop into our IRC channel recently, and there's 1,400 people in our Freenode channel on IRC, which is a little insane because how many people still use IRC? But it's an extremely friendly community as well. You know, some channels you hop in with a third of those users in there. You go in and ask a beginner question, and you get razzed a little bit. You know, somebody will call you a noob or be even more rude than that. You know, just asking beginner level questions. So very, very proud of how helpful our community is on IRC and our mailing lists. You know, it's very rare that you don't get an answer to a question. One of the greatest things, having been acquired by Red Hat, is that it's really allowed us to scale up our team. We now have 3 times the number of people on the core team that we did, a year and a half ago before Red Hat acquired us. This includes dedicated people for doing QA, setting up testing, doing document writing. So it's really great that we're getting more and more people to help out with the workload for the core project, which is very, very insane some days. Finally, just some of the areas we focused on over the last year was trying to get the beta tag off of Windows. We introduced Windows support in about Ansible 1.8, I believe it was, and we've always kind of had that beta tag on there. Well, with 2.2, we put a lot of effort into trying to knock out some of those little issues that you would run into when running Windows, with managing Windows systems when running Ansible. So much improvement there. And as was said earlier, networking has just been insane, going from 0 to nearly 200, maybe 200 modules now, and when 2.3 comes out for the networking support. So really insane growth in the networking space in a short amount of time. So as I said, 2.2, every release it's more and more modules. I think in 2.2 we had just under 900 modules that we shipped with Ansible. I think 2 years ago I was shocked that we had 250 modules that we shipped with Ansible. So it's just, like I said, crazy growth. When we redid 2.0, how many people had used Ansible before 2.0, 1.9 or before? So you may know, when we basically did a very major rewrite for 2.0, and as part of that rewrite, there was definite, in some cases, much slower performance. So 2.2 really focused on trying to get the performance levels back to what they were in the 1.x series of releases. So much faster nowadays. Huge feature, able to inline include roles. For those familiar, maybe not. Before you would include a role at the top of your playbook, and your roles would all be executed first before it started doing any other tasks. Now with this include role syntax, you can actually do some tasks, execute a role, and then do some more tasks, include roles. It allows you to kind of more easily automate what you want to do. So very excited about that feature. Pub sub handlers. So we before you would just notify a handler. Handler is something that you run a task, you notify a handler. Say you install Apache, you do a handler to restart Apache at the end so that everything's done. So you install a package, drop the config, and then run the handler at the end of your playbook. Everything would be started and you'd be up and running. With pub sub handlers, it's now much easier to notify multiple handlers and to kind of be a little bit, you don't have to know all of the handlers ahead of time. You just have to know basically a topic, and you can notify that topic, and then you can have any other handler subscribe to that topic, and all those handlers will run. So it makes things much easier to run with handlers, especially when you're dealing with roles from third parties. You don't have to know every handler in a third-party role that you may download from Galaxy, something like that. Another huge feature that people have been asking for a long time was the variable sizes of serial batches. So a very common thing to do is a canary deployment, where you deploy to one system, and if it works, you then deploy to all the rest of your systems. With the static serial groups allow you to take a small subset of your inventory and do everything on them before kind of moving, allows you to do things very nicely. With variable serial groups, you can do that all in one play now. For this example, it'll do it on one system, then 5 systems, then 10 systems, and whatever that last value is, that's how much it will do from now on forward. Few minor Vault features. You can now, if you have a Vault file, which allows you to store your passwords, you can have your passwords just encrypted in that file. Previously, Vault encrypted the entire YAML file, so if you looked at it, it was just an encrypted file. With this new Vault feature, you can actually just encrypt the password in that YAML file and not the entire YAML file. So it makes it a little easier to see what variables are available in your Vault file without having to unlock the entire thing ahead of time. So if you have a new team member coming on, they can kind of see what's in that file first. And then a big ongoing project we've been working on for quite a while is Python 3 support. Python 3 is really taking off. A lot of the Linux distros out there are starting to make that the default Python installation. So we've been working on getting Ansible core to start with running on systems that use Python 3. So 2.2 was kind of a tech preview for that. It should work in most situations, but there are some code paths you might hit that may cause you problems on Python 3. 2.3 will be much better for that. So 2.3, we're actually in the feature freeze for that right now, so we should be doing our first release candidate for that within a month or less, probably I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks out now at this point. So 2.3 is to a degree a large part about cleaning up a few things from the 2.0 release. We had deprecated some features, so we're definitely going back and trying to solidify some of those things, remove dead code, fixing bugs, really focusing on increasing the performance that we started in 2.2. trying to always make sure we can squeeze as much performance out of the core engine as we can so that it can scale up to managing, hundreds of thousands of nodes in one shot. And something we've been wanting to do for a really long time is improving our documentation. So right now, if you look at our documentation, everything is basically what you get from the devel branch. We're looking at splitting that into devel and stable and maybe older versions. So if you're running, 2.1 in your environment, and you look in the documentation and you pull something out, and you try it, it's like, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, that's because that's a 2.3 feature. So now we're going to try and have those version docs so that it's much more clear what version, what your version of Ansible supports. And then, like I said, Python 3 and modules, it's something we're always working on expanding. So finally, something we did last year was we actually open sourced the code for Galaxy. So you can actually go to GitHub right now and download the source code for Galaxy. It's I'm not sure if it's gotten to the point where you can run it totally in-house without having some external dependencies. I think you still have to have your roles on GitHub. I haven't followed up with the project in a little bit, but definitely recommend you go out and take a look at it if you're interested in running Galaxy internal without having to use our public one. So that's about it. I hand it back to Justin.
Really happy to be introducing Steve Warren. So Steve Warren is the Chief Technologist for Intel Federal. And although we hadn't actually met before this, we did have a great conversation kind of leading up to what it was he was going to talk about. And much to our pleasure, it actually, I think, fits in perfectly. So if you look at a lot of things that Intel does, very much on the forefront of computational science.